Will the massive success of Inside Out 2 actually ruin Pixar rather than save it? Let's talk about that. So it's no secret that prior to Inside Out 2, Pixar has had a string of really bad luck lately. You know, due to the pandemic and Bob Chapek, a lot of their movies at the time were being shoved to Disney Plus. 3 of them, in fact, Luca, Turning Red, and Soul, all ended up in streaming instead of theaters, and I'm sure we all know by now, it's really hard for streaming movies to make money, or at least to quantify how they equate to subscribers on the platform. It's a very weird situation, something that a lot of the streamers go out of their way to keep secret. It's a whole thing. The point is, the movies, despite being incredibly loved, did not earn the studio or Disney any revenue. Then you couple that with the movie that they did make their theatrical return with, Lightyear, which was also being looked to as one of the movies that were sort of expected to help save theaters after the pandemic. Well, that bombed both commercially and financially. It landed like a thud, and it's very funny looking back on that movie, because it's like the first 20 minutes are like the best movie you've ever seen, and then it's followed up by like another hour of potentially one of the worst. Just baffling movie Lightyear was. So now we cut to the present day, and in the lead up to Inside Out 2, Pete Docter was making some very, very strange and quite frankly unlike him comments about the types of stories that Pixar was going to be making moving forward. And if you've read that Bloomberg article, it seems like he was throwing movies like Elemental, Luca, Turning Red, and Soul, a movie he directed, under the bus. He claimed that the stories in these movies were too specific and were hurting the company, which is hilarious when you consider that those 3 movies, despite being released on Disney Plus, were wildly loved and celebrated. And Lightyear, the movie that it sounds like he's seemingly uplifting, floundered. Lightyear resulted in $100 million loss for Disney. Hell, even Elemental, which was like written off as a massive failure when it first launched, ended up making like $500 million worldwide. It ended up having some serious legs because word of mouth about the quality of the movie spread. So I worry about what all this means for the future. We know that we're in for sequels. Pixar just released Inside Out 2, and we have Toy Story 5 incoming. And while sequels are nothing new for Pixar, for the longest time they've been pointed to as the North Star for originality. And they've always managed to balance their sequel to original IP release really well. That's something that I've always really admired about them. And I have to wonder what it feels like to be a storyteller there right now. You know, to hear these comments from Pete Docter, I imagine that it has to be very frustrating, especially when you consider that the movies that he threw under the bus were movies made by POC directors, or in Luca's case, an immigrant. When you hear the big boss of your company saying that your story and that your lived-in experiences that have shaped you are too specific and not universal, how does that affect your ability to tell a story? How does that help you do your job well? I have to wonder, is Pixar going to become like a sequel mill? After Elio comes out, when are we going to get another original movie for them? I really feel like Pixar was setting itself up for a reinvention of sorts. Turning Red, Luca, and Soul all felt really fresh, from subject matter down to aesthetics from regular Pixar fare. And it seemed like there was a sort of, I don't know, creative reset going on at the studio that I was super excited to see happen. But what now? Are directors like Dom Shi, Enrico Carosa, and Peter Sohn going to be able to tell their stories under this new Pixar edict that's getting ready to happen? I guess time will tell. I think what makes this whole thing particularly frustrating too is that I don't even hate Pixar sequels. In fact, I would argue that with the exception of things like Cars 2 and Lightyear, I've even loved a lot of them. Like, I think Monsters University, for instance, is one of their best movies ever. I think it's wildly slept on, and I think in my mind it's probably like the perfect movie about college, and it's a Pixar prequel. I don't not want there to be Pixar sequels or spin-offs or prequels, but I also don't want to reward sidelining new stories and not uplifting brand new storytellers. But then, you gotta counter that with like, well, should we deny ourselves potentially awesome movies in franchises that we like? But then you also have to consider that, like, hey, that's not fair to the people who are working on these sequels, and it just makes this whole situation like really, really frustrating. Like, what do we do? Because if there's a Cars 4, I want to go see it, man. I really like the Cars franchise, with the exception of 2. But, I don't want to reward Bob Iger telling Pete Docter, like, hey, you gotta go back to the mill. You gotta do what we know works. It's an extremely annoying and confusing position to be in as an animation lover, as a consumer, however you want to refer to yourself. And listen, Inside Out 2's massive success so far seems to confirm that the plan to go back to sequels and past properties is firmly in place, and it's weird to know how to feel about it. I really, really wanted Pixar to have this win. I was there day one with the success of Toy Story. I love Pixar. I don't not want them to succeed. In fact, I would say, the industry needs them. The industry needed this win. Movie theaters needed this win. And to couple that, it's a really good movie. We should reward good movies, but I really am genuinely scared that they're gonna take all of the wrong lessons from this success, and it's really scary to know how to feel about it. I gotta hear from you guys though. What do you think Pixar is going to take from the massive success of Inside Out 2? And listen, maybe it's not even a lesson that they're taking. Maybe it's a lesson that like Bob Iger and studio execs are gonna take. Do you think that they will just continue to move forward with really good stories? Maybe the lesson they've learned is like, hey, don't just drop these movies on Disney Plus. Or do you think that they're gonna learn the wrong lessons altogether and just take from this that like, hey, we gotta just invest in nothing but sequels and spin-offs and I don't know, maybe more prequels? I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. This is like, I think, the most confusing time to be a Pixar fan, I feel like, and I'm so curious to know what the people who work there are thinking about all this. But please chime in the comments and let me know what you guys are thinking, and I can't wait to talk to you guys again. Bye.